Hi. So this is a quick video about why indie games are frankly kind of overrated. So this is, I'm making this video like about I believe a month after Silksong came out. And so this is an indie game that, sold millions of copies and effectively, it's doing AAA sales numbers. In fact, a lot of indie games do AAA sales numbers. Like Stardew Valley, obviously, is another example of a game that's, in terms of sales, it's sold more copies than the average, I would argue, AAA game, right? These games can be hyper successful, but in my opinion, they are kind of overrated because if you actually look at most indie games, despite the fact that people claim that these games are supposed to be more creative than AAA stuff, most indie games are highly just derivative. They fall into a handful of niche genres and just tropes, and there's not actually much creativity to be had. Like a lot of them fall into just the Metroidvania genre or, you know, Stardew Valley style games or, roguelike games or deck builders or simulation games. They all fall into some sort of, predefined genre, and they are basically deriving a lot of their, gameplay mechanics and tropes from other games that, already exist. And so to call them creative is a bit of a stretch, in my opinion. They are actually very cookie cutter. The only real purpose that they serve in the gaming market is covering genres that are typically not not really made by the AAA industry. That's the real purpose they serve. Their purpose is not creativity. They're not really creative compared to AAA games. A small minority of them are, but the majority are not. And there is a whole lot of shovelware as well. So, yeah, that's why I think that indie games are kind of overrated because they're derivative. Another reason is that despite the availability of many tools that help you create good graphics, most indie games just don't look very good. In fact, even the pixel art games, like if you compare the pixel art indie games to AAA pixel art games like Metal Slug, made many years in the past, you won't see any indie game match Metal Slug in its pixel art animations. You just don't see it. So even in the sphere of pixel art aesthetics, indie games aren't even better than AAA, right? And generally, I just think that they don't reach their maximum potential. Like there's lots of tools available today that should let you, as a small team of developers, design a fairly competent, good-looking 3D game. Okay, one example of this that I saw recently was Tainted Grail. That game had serviceable graphics and it looked great. And it's basically an indie Skyrim clone. So I asked myself the question, how come a larger number of indie games don't actually have good 3D graphics? And, I just don't really know why. It seems that, a lot of them aren't actually very ambitious. You know what I mean? They're not ambitious. So, yeah, that's a second reason. The first reason, so to summarize, the first reason why I think indie games are overrated is because they're derivative. The second reason is that they're not ambitious in terms of graphics. And in my opinion, I think it's a much better use of your time as a gamer to just play to emulate older AAA games from the PS2 and PS3 eras, and maybe even the PS4 era, instead of playing indies, because you will find plenty of creativity, especially during the PS2 and PS3 days, as opposed to modern, indie games. Not to mention the retro stuff, but since I'm a zoomer, I do have some aversion to really pixelated or retro graphics. So I'll just stick to games that are from the PS2 generation and above. But if you can stomach the older stuff, then all the more power to you. Like in indie games, like a lot of people say that, oh, indie games will save the industry, but really, I just don't agree with that. I think it's much better to just stick to your backlog instead of buying indies. That's not to say that good indie games don't exist. They obviously do. Like I said, Tainted Grail is pretty good, and there are others as well. But I think that they are a bit overrated at times. Thanks for watching the video, and goodbye.